We now want to bring in Alan Dershowitz, a Harvard law professor and author of The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Always good to have you here, Professor.
Thank you so much.
So just off the top, just the breaking news that came out overnight with Rudy Giuliani saying that experts think that Michael Cohen's, the tape that was recorded between him and President Trump, was altered in some way or changed. Here's what he said last night.
What we're investigating is how did that happen? What actually did happen? What was eliminated? And then you've got to raise that question with every one of these tapes. How many of them did he play around with?
Look, we don't know what actually happened here. None of us do. But how are you assessing this? How might this impact all of this?
Well, several years ago, I represented the president of the Ukraine, who was being prosecuted based on a tape recording. And we took the tape recording and had it analyzed by experts and discovered that, in fact, it had been tampered with. Words had been shifted around to make him say things he didn't say, and he was acquitted. So I think any good lawyer always wants to have a forensic examination of the tape, particularly a tape that ends so abruptly. Was it erased? Was it stopped at a point in time in order to avoid exculpatory statements from being made? Can we stretch the words to hear clearly whether the statements involve yes cash or no cash? This is typical of what a good lawyer will do when a case is based on tape against his client. So Rudy Giuliani is doing the right thing. So, I don't think we know enough to come to any conclusions yet.
So, Professor, walking this out just a little bit, is there any implication that laws were broken, campaign finance violations broken? Where do you see this if you walk it all the way out?
Well, let's remember something that people have never focused on. That is, Judge Kimballwood is presiding over the matter, appointed a former judge to assess whether this tape was covered by lawyer-client privilege. She concluded that it was covered by lawyer-client privilege, which means she concluded it was not a criminal act because lawyer-client privilege doesn't cover fraud, crime. It's called the fraud-crime exception. So already we have a judicial determination by a neutral observer that this tape does not constitute crime. So I think that's a very positive development for Giuliani and the Trump team.
Professor, if you listen to Democrats, specifically Representative Denny Heck, he's a Democrat out of Washington. He's a member of the House Intel Committee. They say, and other networks say, time and time again, the walls are closing in on Trump over this tape and maybe others. Listen to what they're saying.
So I think the walls are closing in. This is Donald Trump's worst nightmare because it's not just this revelation or this allegation, because it is yet to be corroborated, but it's the fact that there are 99 additional tapes into the one that was revealed this week. We're now beginning to inch into the territory of conspiracy. And what's the difference? Well, collusion isn't a federal crime.
As you've said, Professor, collusion, not a federal crime. They say they're inching into the territory of conspiracy. What do you say to that?
Well, it's so interesting. A year ago, people were saying collusion was a crime. A year ago, people were saying obstruction of justice could be charged based on the firing of Cuomo. And I've been saying the opposite, and I've been writing books about it. And finally, my views seem to be becoming mainstream. Collusion is not a crime. So I don't see how you can be charging a conspiracy based on collusion. Conspiracy requires an explicit agreement knowingly between people to commit a specific crime. I just don't see that happening. Look, there are these tapes out there. Who knows what the tapes say? The tapes apparently do not involve conversations with President Trump. And so the two questions are they hearsay? And are they admissible, or do they involve lawyer-client communications? Remember that lawyer-client communications can involve conversations between a lawyer and someone else, not the client. For example, another lawyer, or a work product can involve investigations that lawyer is doing. So we're very far from seeing walls closing in based on the fact that we know there are these tapes, because we don't know their content. We don't know with whom they were involving.
Are you worried about the Trump Tower meeting that Michael Cohen says that he was in the room now with the president when he heard about this infamous meeting at Trump Tower between Don Jr. and the Russians? You know, this was the president's attorney who said he would once take a bullet for Donald Trump. Obviously, he's fighting for his own life, but are you concerned about the legality of that? Because Don Jr. testified under oath in Congress that his dad didn't know about this. How serious is that? How concerned should they be?
Well, first of all, I don't worry or be concerned because I'm not President Trump's lawyer. I'm just an objective observer trying to defend the civil liberties of all Americans, and the chips will have to fall where they may. But I think there are problems with the Cohen testimony. It seems that he says there were other people in the room. Let's see if there were. If there were no other people, then it becomes a credibility issue. There's also issues involving lawyer-client privilege. Did he learn that from his client? We don't know enough to assess that. But right now, if that's all Cohen has to offer, I doubt he'll get immunity based on that. And if they have the tapes, they don't really need him. So if I were Cohen's lawyer, I'd be asking myself, has he given them enough to get immunity? And the worry then is that he will not only sing, not him particularly, but any person squeezed this way, sometimes not only sings, but they compose. They get the story better because they know the better the deal, the better the story, the better the deal. Judge Ellis himself said the worry is that squeezed witnesses will not only sing but compose. So that's a concern that all Americans should have about witnesses who are threatened with prosecution and then asked to cooperate.
Professor, let me get your thoughts on just one other story, and that is just before the House went on recess, 11 Republicans filed impeachment articles against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. You have said you believe that was perhaps not the right move. What are your thoughts, and where do they go now?
Well, if you're a supporter of Donald Trump, that's the worst move you can make. But what you're saying is you can impeach somebody without committing any crime. So if the Democrats gain control of the House and try to impeach Trump, not based on a crime, I've written in my book, and I think I've proved conclusively in my book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, that you can't impeach somebody unless you can prove they committed one of the specified crimes. Now the Republicans are saying, no, you can impeach Rosenstein even though he hasn't committed any crimes. That will come back and backfire against Republicans. So it was a foolish move. I think it's been withdrawn. It was probably done just for publicity on the eve of the recess. But even for that, it will be used against them if efforts are ever made to impeach President Trump.
But they have a legitimate grievance that they feel like their attempts to get oversight have been blocked at every turn.
And they have legitimate remedies. They can move for sanctions against him, for contempt. They can move to have him recused if they think there's a conflict of interest, but not impeachment. Impeachment requires, at least according to the research I've done in my book, impeachment requires proof of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, not simply not complying with congressional mandates or having a conflict of interest.
Professor, just quickly, do you think it's going to be a drip-drip situation with Michael Cohen, that every day we're going to be hearing new things, new tapes are going to be released? How should people be thinking about this? How should we all prepare for this to go from here?
Well, Michael Cohen has a great lawyer. He has a great legal team, and they're very experienced, and I'm sure they have a strategy. And Rudy Giuliani is a great lawyer. So we have a clash of really experienced, good lawyers, and it's unclear how it will develop. I don't think there are any smoking guns. If there were, I suspect we'd have heard about them already.
That's a great point.
All right. Always good to have your expertise.
Thanks, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Have a great Sunday.
You.